Hello, and welcome to episode 391 of the Crate and Crowbar, a gaming podcast being recorded on the 26th of January, 2022. I'm Marsh Davis, and I'm joined by Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
And Graham Smith.
Hello.
What you been playing, boys?
We've been playing with the vampires, haven't we, Alex?
We've been surviving with the vampires.
Do you want to start? You introduced me to this. You cursed me with this game.
Yeah, it's a bit of a curse. It's Vampire Survivors is it was introduced to me as the new PC sleeper hit. That's what how I first came across it. It is a very, very, very cheap game on Steam, about £2 or something like that. I think it's on itch as well. And it builds itself as a bullet survival vampire kind of sort of vampire game. It says bullet hell. I wouldn't really say it's bullet hell. It's more like Geometry Wars or something like that, where you play a little vampire hunter. And you have lots and lots of beasties spawn on the screen all around you, and you maneuver yourself around, shoot out projectiles of various types, gain XP. Everything fires without your control. There are some weapons, some things that you shoot out or use, which shoot in the direction that you are traveling, but by and large, that is pretty much the only control you have over your weapons. And you earn XP for killing beasties, and then you channel that XP into as you level up, I should say. You'll buy more weapons and then upgrades for those weapons, and you become a vampire slaying machine over the course of a 30-minute session if you survive that long.
You can't target enemies then at all?
No. And so, that is its strength.
So hang on, all you're doing is moving around and avoiding things, right?
Yeah. It's just total directional controls. That's all you're using. And what over the course of the next few minutes, Graham and I will discuss and probably not come to any conclusions as to whether there's any skill in this game.
Well, because I've already come to the conclusion that I don't care if it has no skill in it whatsoever.
Okay, that is the conclusion that we can give you. It doesn't matter because this is as Graham wrote on our favorite shotgun yesterday, I think. This is a dopamine machine. This is, oh my goodness, the power ups, like your level ups, come at such a gratifying rate of and the effects of the upgrades that you have such gratifying effect that time just disappears into this one. How far have you got into it? Have you finished a run, Graham?
No, I've not managed to finish a run. I've got up to like level 83 in terms of like your character progression. Your character levels up as you kill enemies and collect the gems they drop.
So that's 83 times the upgraded, and therefore got to choose an upgrade. I should say also you get upgrades for picking up chests, which drop often when you kill kind of little boss characters as you go along, which are sort of tougher. And when you open a chest, you get this little screen which kind of pops up, and this little music sort of kind of fruit machine music starts, and you see all the upgrades kind of whirling by, and there are swirly things and colorful things. Usually it's just one upgrade that you get. Sometimes you'll get 3, and the music really reflects that. It's a complete fucking like tonal kind of sort of, what is it, whiplash, because it sort of, well, I suppose actually none of it is very grim, but this one is like very twinkly kind of fruit machine music, fruit machine looks. Sometimes you get 3, and then I've seen on a Northern Lion stream, he got a penta upgrade, 5 of the motherfuckers, and it like the whole screen was flashing colours. It was so good.
I've had 5 a couple of times, and like you say, none of the game is grim exactly, but it's very bare bones pixel art. Like, it's very restrained. You're running around a grassy field with almost no other details. All of the enemies, they barely animate. They maybe have a couple of frames of wibbly pixel art animation. It all looks incredibly basic. And then you open a chest and fireworks go off before it opens, and then rainbows shoot out of it before it gives you the actual items. And yeah, like
very Peggle. It's very Peggle, isn't it?
Yeah, that moment is very Peggle. But it's also like, you say, I got to level 82 or whatever. That means I've been upgraded 82 times. It's also like a lot of the upgrades are just doubling what you've already got, especially in the early games. Or, like, so at the very beginning, there'll be like 5 bats on screen, and you'll have a wand that will fire 1 blast every 3 seconds. And it feels, when you first play it, like, oh god, this is a bit of a slog. Like, if you feel really weak and kind of pathetic, and you can't even aim your one piddly little wand blast, and you're just walking around. But it's how quickly, you've got 2 wand blasts, and then 3 wand blasts, and then a fireball, and then a spinning Bible that goes around you and crashes into enemies, and then like a boomerang blade, and then and then throwing knives as you're walking around, and you've got all these things at once. And then just multiples of it, and multiples of it, and multiples of it. And then you start getting the evolved forms of those weapons, where it'll take the fireballs, for example, which maybe have previously gone through 3 enemies or something before the fireballs disintegrate. And it will mean that the evolved form of it, they don't stop at all. They will go through an infinite number of enemies. And
you really know it, because now it's like meteor kind of graphics. You see them just kind of arcing across the screen.
And you're being surrounded by hundreds of enemies at a time. There's a massive swarm, and you've spent most of the game kind of like edging away from them and trying to squeeze through gaps. Like, that's the bullet hell element, is essentially the enemies are very slow moving bullets themselves, and you're like kind of dodging around them. And then suddenly you've got this fireball thing that just can carve a path through hundreds of them, and you can just walk into the crowds essentially and picking up all that XP. Stuff like that just feels so good. It's a game that's about nothing else other than the numbers going up, except you don't even really see the numbers. You just feel the change as you grow in power, and see the tide turn in some ways against the enemies. Both is you go from 5 bats to 100 bats on screen with 1 witch, which is kind of like the boss character, to a few minutes later when there's 100 witches on screen, and what previously felt strong to you, you're just mowing them down by the thousands. And also just in the sense of you've spent all that time running away, and then you have these moments where you kind of feel like you get ahead of the leveling curve of the game. You feel like and there's a thing in my brain there which is like, oh yeah, I must have made some pretty good decisions with those upgrades. I got those choices. I made that decision of which of the 3 upgrades to get. I must have chosen well, because now I feel powerful. And like, every game I play, I feel powerful around about the same point in the game. Like, I feel weak between level 20 and level 25. And then as I get to level 30, I start to feel strong again. Yeah. It's probably this game is just manipulating me, and I am totally okay with it manipulating me.
You said thousands of witches.
Yeah. So
what is the hierarchy of enemies that you're facing here? What's more dangerous than a vampire in this?
Witches
game?
are at the top, actually. Definitely. Oh, see, it starts off with
It's bats. Bats is the first
thing. That's right. Yeah.
Then
he goes to skeletons.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Then he goes to mummies.
Yeah.
Then he goes to kind of like, there's this plant, kind of planty kind of mantis looking thing. Then it kind of
you get a lot of them
hazy.
Yeah, you start to get a lot of them at the same time. So you're fighting a swarm of
mummies,
one witches, giant praying mantis for some
ghosts.
reason.
Yeah, ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts.
The first spike that I tend to get, like, and it's been fairly consistent, is a moment where you get these clouds of ghosts, lots of ghosts in these clumps that fly at you in a group. And before this point, there have been these clumps of bats that fly at you. But there's something, I think that, because in general, all the enemies are kind of physical in the world, so they jostle with each other as they're trying to get to you. But I think that the ghosts can actually go through others, and that's what makes them dangerous, because you they come right at you, and that's like, and for some reason there's quite a lot of other enemies, so you don't have many options to sort of run away, on the kind of the other axis to where the direction that they're coming at you on. So yeah, but like that spike has been fairly consistent.
Ludonarrative synergy right there, isn't it?
Yeah, ghosts, eh? Yeah.
You can't jostle the ghost clump. That's in their lore. But is there a deep fiction behind this? Why have all these different enemies decided to ally themselves against you?
Well, I think it's got something to do with the Balpaisi family, or maybe it's the Ladonna family. There's no story in this at all. There is something we haven't talked about, which is or explained, which is that a lot of the weapons are lifts from Castlevania. So there is an axe that goes out in an arc upwards and then falls down. There's a cross that's sort of a boomerang style cross that Graham mentioned. A throwing knife that shoots out in front of you. There is the holy water, which leaves these circular kind of damage over time areas around you. The rotating book is like the one in Castlevania. So the vampire hunters. Oh, there's a whip that fires out behind you and in front of you. The sort of on the kind of lateral plane. So like there's this sort of Castlevania thing to it. So the like the Belmont family in Castlevania, there's this sort of like little nods to that in this, where one of the characters is Antonio Balpaisi. He comes with a whip to start with. They all have little kind of bonuses to them. Antonio, every 10 levels, attacks deal 10% more damage. There's Imelda, his sister, mother, daughter, who knows, is a magic user, shoots with a kind of wand. The wands are really good. And she gets more experience as she grows faster. I like Pasqualina Balpaisi. Pasqualina Balpaisi has the rune thing. Was it the rune something or other? It's this projectile which shoots out and bounces off other things, but flies through enemies for a certain time before it despawns, and then another one fires. That thing does huge amounts of damage. I know that it does huge amounts of damage because when you finish a run, either by dying or by completing, it tells you the DPS of all of your weapons and how long they were active for, and the numbers are quite incredible. And some of the weapons, with me, the Rune Tracer, that's what it's called, Rune Tracer. The Rune Tracer, every time, just absolutely minces enemies. So good.
See, I like that. I don't know if there's a character that starts with this, but I like the bird that you can get.
Oh yeah, do you like the blackbird or the white bird?
Oh, I don't know if I've encountered the blackbird. It's the white bird I was thinking of. Kind of like there's a circle of effect that it draws on the map, and then it will launch projectiles, and it starts off again with like one projectile, and then you can level it up until it's this aerial bombardment dove drone flying around you, launching 8 projectiles at a time on a constant stream.
Yeah. And when you get lots of them going, they're just clearing vast areas because it's, they're doing damage to an area as well. And I think I often feel kind of, nothing's, the build is everything. And I've definitely had bad builds. I've definitely had really good builds. I've completed it twice now, and that has been so. Do you know what happens at the end of a run?
I watched a Northern Line video where I think I saw, but you can. I think you can spoil it. I don't think it's. Something that needs to be kept secret.
And there's very little Ludo narrative excitement to be had here. It's just weird. Just around kind of by the end of a run, you're fundamentally your build should be strong enough for you just to stand in place and you're killing enemies at a rate of probably about 100 every 2 seconds or something like that. They're just coming at you. There's so many on screen that they are jostling with each other and sort of squeezing in towards you, and you're just creating this space into which that they can sort of squidge, but you're just murdering them as you're doing so. And at 30 minutes, they all just disappear, and the end boss turns up, just comes on a beeline at you. I don't even know what it is. It happens so fast. Comes in at a beeline at you, comes at you. I've seen damage numbers coming off it, suggesting that you are doing damage to it with your weapons, but it basically just sort of comes at you, drains all your health. Then you just think, oh Christ, I'm dead. That's the run over. What? I lost? And then it says, you survived. And oh, okay, that was good. And that was and that's the end of a run. And it sort of then goes to the victory screen. Well, it just shows you what your DPS was. But yeah, yeah, and I think that and once you do that first on one of the 2 levels, you can then do, and I haven't tried this, is it frenzy mode?
I don't know actually.
I've got the game running here. I'm just going to see what happens. Right, yeah,
Okay.
it goes into hyper mode, and you can click hyper mode, and I think, and it 50% extra gold and 10% luck. I can't remember what luck does now, but
Luck gives you a chance of getting more options when you.
That's right.
When you level up, more options of skills to level. You should also point out, like, it is in early access, so that ending might just be, it's not done yet. I think the latest update for it was like 0.24 or something like that.
Yeah,
and they're still regularly adding new monsters and new weapons and that sort of stuff. And
I expect there'll be new areas as well, new kind of places to fight.
Yeah, and there is on the roadmap plans for a story mode as well.
Oh, really?
So maybe it will fill in more.
I don't want a story.
No, I don't really want a story either. But maybe you'll get more lore about the Belpacey family or whatever. The other thing is, like, I don't think we've explained the gold, because you are earning gold during levels, which you can then spend on permanent upgrades in between. And initially it felt like, oh, that's going to be the game. Like, it's going to be this grind of spending the pretend money to get these upgrades. And that's the only way it's actually possible to get to the end and make actual progress. But it's not. Like, I think I've got like 2 or 3 upgrades or something. And I've got to like 29 minutes into a run a couple of times. So I'm very close to being able to finish it. The upgrades are nice to like speed you along a little bit, but they're completely inessential. It's a game that's very content for you to just rinse it, I think. Like, even the achievements that are in it, I've got almost all of the achievements after around 4 hours. And I feel like that might be seen as a negative, but to me, it's like, no, this game gave me everything I wanted and gave it to me in a really short space of time. That's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that I think that you can max out numbers, and when you do get those kind of the long-term upgrades, the gold costs, are quite big for a lot of them. Like, and as soon as you get one in a the first one is 3,000 gold, and the next one presumably is going to be even more. And on my best run, I think I've got about sort of 2,000 gold or something like that. So there is definitely a grind here if you want to max out the numbers. And I suspect in hyper mode you probably do need that. You probably do need those upgrades to be able to survive, because I just started hyper and then paused it, and on my screen at the very start of the game, there are some of those howling ghosty kind of characters that explode when they get close to you. That's the first enemy, and you're not even going to be able to be assured that you'll shoot at them or have a bullet available to them by the time they're there. So I think you probably need all that stuff for that, but you don't need to play that to have fun, because you just watch the numbers go up in normal mode. Oh, there's one other thing we also haven't mentioned, which is that pickup that attracts all the experience
Ooh.
left lying around the ground.
That feels nice, doesn't it?
Oh my god! because in a run, especially later on, you're just unable to pick up all of the experience of the stuff that you're killing, because all your weapons are just wildly decimating stuff all over the screen and off it, and this item just sucks everything in, and you'll just upgrade, level up, 5-6 times on the trot. Oh, so good.
I like there's a little short burst flamethrower power up you can get as well, which just like insta kills any enemy it touches, and that feels really nice. After having been surrounded by 300 enemies for a while, just being able to mow them all down in an instant feels great.
How bad does it feel to fail in this game? Because that's often a test of these sort of roguelike games, or even Geometry Wars sort of games. Like I think Tom Senior was saying that Returnal makes him feel really bad when he's reset back to zero. I'm assuming from your enthusiasm that that's not the case here.
I think there's an interesting challenge at every stage. The very first, in the very early bit of the run, you're kind of, I've found myself like, oh, how can I kill stuff in a really efficient way, so I can pick up the experience quickly, and that's an interesting game in itself. And then because of the randomized nature of the upgrades, you don't know quite what you'll be playing in those early things. So, because the upgrades, the weapons you have very much shape the movement you're going to be doing, and the way that you're addressing enemies. There is skill in this game. It's definitely not just sort of, it's not an idle game. So that's fine. I think also, it's, I don't know, it's lighter than something like Returnal, which is sort of wants you to feel dread, and also has asked you to sit down for hours, or a lot longer before that point you died, and said this is all the stuff you didn't get.
Still, 30 minutes is quite a long time for these sorts of things, isn't it?
But you don't get anything extra. In literal terms, all you've done is not earn quite as much gold as you would have done. You get 500 gold for completing. That's it. Which isn't an awful lot. So you just play again. Like, your gold over time, if you play, half a run over and over again, probably isn't that much lower. Well, maybe it is, but it's not all that.
I'm playing it as a second screen game. Like Returnal demands your entire attention on your big TV with both hands on the controller, whereas I am playing Vampire Survivors basically vertical while watching YouTube videos. Occasionally, I'm not looking at the screen all the time that I'm playing this game. I think the first couple of times I died, I was like, oh, like I would be having a lot more fun if I wasn't dying and losing everything and getting sent back to the start. But once I worked out, just how the game works, I was instantly 4 times better at it. Like on my third go, I think I lived literally 4 times longer than I did in my first 2 goes.
Yeah.
And it's once I worked out the pace and what I was supposed to be doing, actually it wasn't that difficult. And then, the spectacle of it ramps up so quickly that even when you get sent back to the start and feel very weak, I know that that's only going to be, a minute before I have, a couple of upgrades.
Right.
That make it more interesting.
Sounds like Robotron.
Yeah. But without the hardcore, low core Robotron.
I'd buy that for $1 or whatever it's costing.
$3, £2, $3, or if you play it on itch, I'm pretty sure it's free and it runs in your browser.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
which is pretty good.
Marty, if you play it, you'll be really very upset with its abuses of pixels. There are so many different scales of pixels going on.
I did see screenshots of it. I assume it looks better in motion?
No.
It does look better in motion,
only because you're just enjoying what you're doing.
Once you've got the spell effects and the spectacle and everything is bursting and everything is sort of like when you pick up the gems, they ping in a really satisfying way, and when your various projectiles connect to certain, like your different projectiles all have a different sound, and so as that ramps up as well, that helps. make it feel better. But the pixel art on its own is not stellar. The pixel art looks like I drew it.
Have you been playing anything else, Alex?
Well, I tell you what, I haven't been playing that as much as I thought I was going to. I mean, I've put quite a few hours into it actually now. You played Halo Infinite, haven't you?
I have. I finished the campaign.
You finished it. That's good. Okay, you can tell me stuff. Because I've been, without really realizing it, I realized that I just sort of dropped it. I really loved that game in the first few hours. Just like charging around the environments, having a wonderful 30 seconds over and over again. And thought it was, a real shot in the arm. And then I sort of sensed a sense of sameness to it. I don't know, like it was, in that way that open world games can get, where you recognize the kinds of play that you're going to get from different landmarks and different things, because they're designed to do a certain thing. There's the bases that you can capture back again, and there are the things you can destroy, and I felt it started to feel really samey.
Interesting.
And that, I think that would be all right if it wasn't for the inherent promise that combat engine, that combat design and the openness of its world feels like it should be offering, where, the capturing the little mini bases, the FOBs, which, they're scattered all over the place, and they become somewhere you can respawn when you do so. So it's valuable to do that. None of them posed any kind of an interesting scenario for me. And that really contrasted with something like Far Cry, where it's what are they called? Stronghold. What are they called? The Tom Francis's favorite
Outposts.
Outposts. Where outposts in that, every one of them poses its own special challenge, or they're always interesting. You always want to do them. FOBs, it's just a collection of random monsters which I never paid any attention to, and sort of like it became irritating to find the last few to mop up. And there have definitely been some moments in it which have been just spectacular and fun. First time you come up against those Covenant tanky things, the sort of that shoot the great big sort of arcing kind of plasma ball at you, that full tank size things. First time I saw one of those, that was a fun one, because I hadn't come across them in that game yet. And the story level, or the bit in the story that is sort of like the story funnels you into, but where you go through a series of big gates, all guarded, by lots and lots of enemies, and that felt really organic, the way that I came up against it and took it all down. Definitely some wonderful bits, but it feels so much slighter than I feel that it should do, so much samier than it feels that it should be. And then the story levels itself, I don't give a shit about Forerunner, environments, and it keeps putting them in them. And like, this isn't a corridor shooter; it just isn't, unless you do something interesting with your corridors. But they're just conduits to the next room that you're going into. If you fill them with fucking flood or something, that could be interesting, or something anyway. Very odd, very odd, very odd indeed.
It's interesting.
Is that on point?
It's on point for your opinion. Sure. I mean, it's interesting that you're finding fatigue before you've exhausted the open world sections, because once you've exhausted the open world sections, believe me, you'll be begging for the open world to return, because it's just Forerunner corridors for, I don't know, the last 3-4 hours of the game or something like that. And they fucking suck balls, unfortunately. I mean, I feel there's a lot of asset reuse.
Yes.
Maybe because there's a lore basis for that. I'm sure that why would the Forerunners construct different corridors to just vary things up visually from one corridor to the next? They wouldn't. They would use the same design. But that aside, it's just the same cycle of corridors over and over again with slightly different enemy placements, and the combat is, you know, still interesting within that, but like there's only so many different ways they can juggle that to keep it, you know, lively.
It feels like they lean very much on it. They sort of like, oh, we haven't got time here. There's just another room with a slightly different layout of enemies, and we'll just let the combat engine create the fun.
Yes, and I think that was the wise choice, given probably the development environment in which it was had to emerge from. But at the same time, it's not a very gratifying conclusion to that campaign sequence. Terrible boss battles as well. You've got honkingly bad boss battles ahead of you, should you wish to continue. But I totally agree that the open world sections are at their best when they have very designed elements within them. I think they're at their worst when they are freeform, sort of, you know,
in world, just sort of, yeah.
Because I mean, for one thing, they can't really design for the as Chris was saying in the last episode, where, you know, forts are built to withstand attack from all sides, you know, which makes them not very interesting spaces in certain ways, because there's no kind of like designed story for attacking a fort. You can come at it from any side, and that doesn't necessarily make it a particularly gratifying experience for the attacker by design. And that's the sort of the feeling you get from the outposts or whatever they are, the FOBs, or any of the kind of multiply duplicated encounters that you can have in the open world of Halo Infinite. They all feel like, by dint of coming at them from any side, they feel very interchangeable a lot of the times. And it means that quite a lot of the sort of the ways in which that combat shines isn't given expression always, because you can end up just in the middle of a battle and just be fighting 360 degrees around you and sort of scarpering away to hide in a corner. And it doesn't feel very Master Chief. No. But then to counter that, there are missions where there are more obvious routes that you are, in inverted commas, meant to take towards an objective. There may be choices within the different routes you can take, and those sort of more kind of structured set pieces, which nonetheless use the open world to give you sort of choice and freedom, are, I think, pretty exquisite. But then there's nothing in it which is as gobsmacking combination of those freeform combat mechanics and just scale and set piece wonder as the Scarab battle. I know everybody says this has been the thing, that where are the Scarabs? But like, the reason the Scarabs are cool is because never before in probably any mainstream game had something that large just turned up that was navigable in first person like you would any kind of structure or level, but it was also a giant enemy that you had to take down. And then two of them turn up and you have to, you know, drive onto them on the back of like a fucking dune buggy and destroy them. Nothing like that happens in Halo Infinite. For all the kind of wonder of the kind of open world, which is gorgeous and huge, and just the scale of some of the fortresses that you encounter, nothing feels quite as audacious a meshing of mechanics and scale and blockbuster wow as those Scarabs.
Yeah, but I actually honestly don't think that it really. I think it could have had its own stuff. It has these little promises, these little there's definitely little bits in it which do sort of like nearly get there. But yeah, fascinating game really. But I hadn't really. It's odd how it just sort of seeped out of my consciousness. And I was
I'd really love to have a a developer's commentary walkthrough of that game, but the kind of developer's commentary that would never happen, because I think what's really interesting about it are all the compromises that they've had to make, and without dissing the team involved, what they've done, presumably, I mean, it is incredible, and to have to come through a difficult development period with a game that wasn't necessarily finding its feet, and then chaperone that across a very short space of time into something which feels as polished, at least superficially, as Halo Infinite. I think that's a really interesting design challenge, and I'd love to hear them unpick it. But you're never going to get that kind of frankness from a developer, because it would obviously, involve some admission of of design failures, or process failures at least.
Yeah. What have you been playing apart from this?
I feel like I've been playing what is the most opposite game from both Halo Infinite and what would you call it? Vampire
Survivors.
Survivors. There you are. I've been playing Strange Horticulture, which is
Strange Horticulture,
a game in which you identify and dispense plants for medicinal and occult purposes. It's set in some sort of fantastical version of the Lake District, unusually, circa, I guess, the 19th century. I'd guess from the close. And since I'm in the midst of writing a tabletop role-playing game, which is set in an alternate version of the north of England in the past, where magic is a terrible reality, this is very relevant to my interests, and it's also relevant to my interests because it's because I really like games in which your interaction with them is merely to obtain paths and utilize information. I think information game is how that's often said now. Or a UI game, because at least in this case, it's entirely conducted through a 2D UI representing your shop and occasionally a map. And usually in those sorts of games, you sort of the information that you're obtaining, parsing, and utilizing pertains to some sort of like mystery, or specifically like a murder mystery, like the Sherlock games or Return of the Obra Dinn. And there is a murder in this. But what's weird about it is it's almost entirely without any mystery whatsoever. It's like almost remarkable that a game whose subject matter involving occult murders could manage to be this unmysterious in its plot. It's like literally the first thing you think about the murders proves to be true. And the game just sort of trundles along towards like a heavily foreshadowed event with all the characters occasionally popping in going like, well, that's bad, that's happening. I hope we get to do something about it.
Is there a function to it being...
Because you're just a fucking botanist. Sorry?
Is there a function to it being so obvious? Like, is it intentional that because the fact that allows you to do other things in the game?
Well, I think it's almost that your involvement with it. I mean, you like I say, you're just a botanist. So, you shouldn't be really investigating murders.
No.
You should leave that to the cops.
Yeah.
But you have sort of wiggle room within the story about what your role is. Like you can aid or hinder other characters to bring about different endings. But like, I don't think it's... I mean, it may be intentional, but I think it's not necessarily good that there is no deduction in it at all as it relates to the kind of main narrative. You even get these sort of like little cards of all the characters you meet with backstory on them, and you think like when you start picking these up that this is a roster of suspects, but the game has absolutely no interest in pretending like in concealing who is responsible or what they're trying to do. I found that weirdly infuriating. I don't know why.
So what are you doing during the game?
So,
like what you actually... Yeah.
So the game's mysteries are entirely reserved for its plants, and you pick up different plants. You have to work out where they may be found, use a map to find them. You have to work out what they are, what they're called, what they're commonly called, what their effects are, and so forth. And you do this you have a picture of a plant, and then you have a sort of botanical guide which lists the plants with some intentionally vague or partial drawings. And then you have to match the descriptions of the partial drawings to the plants in your inventory and work out which are which and try not to poison anybody. And the descriptions are like vague enough that there could be multiple candidates for any given plant on your shelves. But usually you can narrow it down with like a closer inspection, which might give you like a clue to how it smells or how it feels to hold. Or you can just exclude other candidates by positively identifying them as other plants. And that stuff is really quite cool. Like, I think, and it's not, it's something that might slip your attention as to how well designed it is, but the number and variety of plants and how different they are and the ways in which they can be different is something that needed to be incredibly finely gauged for it to be to be rewarding and not overly difficult, and they've hit that perfectly, and that is incredibly laudable, I think. And there's some light riddling as well, which will help you locate new clues. Like I said, there's a map in it, and you sort of get to make expeditions from your shop. Not really, you just click on a square on the map and it tells you what you get, basically. And there's sort of clues as to which square to click, but they are very low level riddles, I would say. They're very, very, very easy.
Do they fit within the world? Like, who's actually giving you the riddle, if you sort of mean?
Not always clear in certain circumstances. There's sort of like in between days, as this game is apportioned up into a period of time, and you get certain customers on certain days. In between days, you get a screen which gives you a card which has a cryptic clue on it as to where to pick up a new plant. Those seem to be like the mission critical plants that you need for the overall narrative. No real narrative explanation is given as to where these cards are coming from. But as for the rest of the game, you have other contacts in town who will say, "Hey, I spotted a plant. It was near the beginning of a river and next to a mountain." And you look at the map and you try and figure out where that might be, and how many squares to the left you need to go to pick it up. So that's about as far as it goes with the sort of that sort of riddling stuff. But like, I like all that stuff, but as the game sort of goes on, I felt like the tools I had at my disposal to sort or label this growing collection of plants just aren't sufficient for the task. I mean, I don't mind like these puzzling games giving you legwork, but I feel like in the role of a botanist whose job it is to organize these things, I actually didn't have enough tools to organize these things. It's quite frustrating. Like, I'd like to be able to tick off entries in the reference book once I'd identified them. But instead, you just have to flick through, I don't know, 50 names of different flowers. And it's hard, as a man with a decaying brain, hard for me to maintain an internal list of which ones have been ticked off and which ones haven't. And because there's no update to those entries, and I feel like you end up having to re-identify plants every single time an order comes in, because your way of like collating the information you have already acquired just isn't good enough for you to keep any kind of track of things. You can put a label on plants, which obviously would be their name, but you can't, for example, say what their effects are, or it needs an index. I need to be able to build an index so I can say, okay, what are all the plants that affect memory, and then I'll get a list of those. I know it feels like there's a lot more they could have done there, with a lot more development time, obviously, which would have improved the experience.
The book in Obra Dinn is like fundamental. You can see how the whole game is designed around the book. Information games are about what games record, what games surface to you, what you discover. Yeah, the book seems quite important.
It is, and this game gives you a really appreciation of how good that book is in Obra Dinn, and how insufficient it is here. Even down to like, there's not enough space really for you to like lay your plants out in useful groupings. There's enough space to lay them out alphabetically, but that doesn't help if a character comes in and says, I'd like a plant with this effect, or I'd like a plant with, I'd like a plant, and they give the common name for it rather than the name that's alphabetically in the encyclopedia. So there's kind of a bit of frustration there, and that process just ends up feeling quite samey because there aren't enough different ways for you to kind of attack that information. You end up having to do the same work again and again and again. But I do really enjoy the sort of ambience of it. It's got this kind of spooky, somber feel to it, which is also quite chill.
Yeah.
Don't know why it's set in the Lake District. I mean, they use most of the names, but they change Windermere to Undermere. I don't know why.
But that's because it's spookier, isn't it? Undermere is more spookier than Windermere's.
Is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, they've still got like Scarfell Pike and
But that's because
the
that's a
old
cool
man
name.
Coniston.
That's an instantly cool name, Scarfell Pike.
Oh yeah, what about Bootle?
Okay.
How cool is Bootle? Yeah. It's like a fantasy map, but it is of the Lake District, like accurately. But they've moved a few things, which, if you know something about the Lake District, can be occasionally very confusing because you'll be looking for things in the wrong place. But otherwise, the Lake District, it's all right, I suppose. I'd say in conclusion.
Right, I suppose. Yeah, no, see, I really enjoyed Obra Dinn for its naturalism, that it felt like everything existed within the world, and the book was a product of an expression of that world, and therefore it fitted within it so beautifully. And I saw that I just didn't get that impression from the screenshots and the videos that I saw of Strange Horticulture.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a 3D game, so it can't feel quite as
Sure.
immersive in the way that Obra Dinn does. And it is all it does quite a lot to fit a lot of information into a single screen, and that's quite impressive. But yeah, it does. It's left me itching for some larger mystery experience.
You could play that new Sherlock Holmes game then, can't you?
I could. I was thinking of doing that.
Yeah, I thought you might.
There was the sexy Sherlock Holmes game. I think wasn't there also a sexy Poirot game?
What the
Is
hell?
there? That's every Poirot, though, isn't it?
How could it not be?
I'm pretty sure that maybe it didn't come out, maybe it's still in development, but I'm pretty sure there's a Poirot game where he's younger, and there was a dev blog where they said they'd created a new type of mustache in designing the Poirot.
I don't know what to say. I need more answers. I definitely that raises a lot of questions.
We'll stick a link to this in the show notes.
That seems important. Was it a moustache that Poirot himself could wear?
Yes, yeah, it was their new character design for young sexy Poirot.
Mm-hmm.
They invented a new mustache.
I mean, I want to know.
Are there any sort of like horny old detectives who haven't been turned into weird
Morse.
younger versions? No, they did it with Morse. There's young Morse.
Oh, on TV, yeah, but not on games.
Oh,
I thought you meant in games. I would like a Morse game.
I'd like a young CAD file. That's what I want.
Graham, have you been playing anything else apart from Vampire Survivors?
I've been playing Fuga Melodies of Steel.
Wow, okay.
Have either of you heard of this or played this?
Nope.
No, and my brain would immediately resist remembering it.
Yeah, which is fair. I had to write it down in order to remember it for this. Fuga Melodies of Steel is a turn-based role-playing game.
Okay.
It's Japanese, so it's a JRPG in a lot of senses, and it is set in a world of anthropomorphic dogs and cats.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of modeled after like late 30s, 1940s Europe, kind of fantasy world. And your town, your little village, in what I'm guessing is Central Europe somewhere, is invaded by the dog Nazis who raise your village, as happens. And a group of children from the village flee the town and take shelter in a nearby cave, in which they find what is basically like Howe's moving tank. It's an actual angry house. It's a tank big enough for these like 9 friends or something like that to live in, and they get in the big tank, and it's made by a previous civilization, a more technologically advanced civilization. But they take this the rest of the villagers who weren't so lucky to escape are all kidnapped by the dog Nazis, and so these anthropomorphic children cats. I don't know whether to call them kittens or not when they're anthropomorphized. They decide to use the tank to fight back, basically, and go rescue the rest of the villagers. And it's a turn-based RPG, so the characters, they can walk around the tank and you can move from room to room, and they can have dialogue sequences, and as you talk to one another they develop affinities, their relationship, they become friendlier. That makes them better in battle. And then the battles are, screen split down the middle, your tank on the left hand side, enemy tank on the right hand side, and what you're doing is you're assigning your cats to different cannons on the tank.
Okay.
And their personalities link up to the types of cannons in some way, such that they, certain cats make certain cannons more powerful if you slot them in that socket. And likewise, if you put them, you can fit 2 cats on each cannon. And if you put 2 cats that are, friends from the interstitial sections together, then your shots will be more powerful. And so there is, kind of satisfying strategy. Like, I think it's actually quite good as a turn-based combat game. I haven't played a huge amount of it, but there's satisfying strategy or tactics in making decisions about where you're positioning your cats and when to use your shields and fighting back against these Nazi dogs or dog Nazis. I'm not so wild about the anime cat dialogue stuff in between. It's no Fire Emblem. Like, it's not gonna throw you or overcome its fundamental twee anime-ness in any way, except for there's 3 main cannons on the tank, and then there's a special cannon which is called the Soul Cannon. And what you can do, right, is if you're having a difficult time in a particular battle, you can tell one of the cats to go to the Soul Cannon, which will guarantee your victory. It's a cannon so powerful it will destroy any tank you're fighting, but it will consume the soul of the child that you send into it.
The child being a cat.
Yes. Killing them forever. And then the plot keeps going past that point. And branches accordingly, and the remaining characters, obviously, depending on whom you've sent to this miserable fate,
Wow.
have different reactions to it based on what their relationship was with this character beforehand. And that's quite a compelling setup, actually. Like, giving me a branching narrative with quite dramatic stakes like that. I'm quite inclined to keep playing it, even though I find the dialogue utterly banal and mostly filled with ellipses and these other elements that JRPGs and visual novels seem to love. But yeah, I played it for a couple of hours.
How's it
like
presented?
Strange Horticulture, it's all right. It's 2D, but it's quite lush. It's a 2D side on. You're getting like a cut through of the tank as you're walking around. It's a little bit painterly, I would say, in terms of the textures. And in the battles themselves, the tanks do look cool. Like, the tank that you're in, it really is like a 3-4 story building. Lots of moving parts, lots of steam pouring off it. It's got pretty fun, like, attack animations and that sort of stuff as you're striking against different enemies. So I like how it looks, but I don't like the character designs. Like, they all look, like I say, like twee, cutesy, slightly creepy animals on legs, dressed as like 1930s European children.
It seems like it would make it much easier to feel okay about packing them into a shell and then firing them.
It's like the kind of spunky leader of the troop of children wears like a flat cap and dungarees and like a white shirt rolled up to the elbows. But then, he's got big ears sticking out from underneath his flat cap. I don't know. I don't know. I think if I saw this, and it was recommended by someone, I don't remember who now because it was a few months ago, but if I saw this in Steam, I would not have looked at it twice. Basically, I would have instantly scrolled past just based on the character designs, I think. But actually poking around it, it was more interesting to me as a strategy game or a tactical RPG. And I think it's a sequel, actually. I think it's a sequel to like a DS game or a 3DS game.
Yeah, I don't recognize the name at all. But then they are often difficult to remember. Sort of this sort of class of RPG.
I have a feeling like maybe it's set in the same universe as another RPG series.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is like the turn-based tank spin-off.
This is where they go on holiday to America, to Europe.
Maybe, was it Little Tales Story? Which I think was... maybe that's the mobile version. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes, because I'm pretty sure it's the sequel to a DS or a 3DS game. And then I think also this is like a spin-off of like a more major RPG series. Again, not one I had ever actually heard of, but I'll look that up later. But yeah, like Strange Horticulture, it's all right.
But you do get to kill children, so I mean, that's a bullet point, isn't it?
And animals at the same time.
Cats, they're cats, Marty. And I like dogs. My own dog is sleeping on his back behind me. All his teeth are showing. They're wonderful.
I'm not sure it's as clean cut as the cats are good guys and the dogs are all Nazis. I think there are good dogs and bad dogs and good cats. And
just
bad
as they
cats.
are in real life.
Yeah.
This is an inversion of the anthropomorphization that was put forward by Art Spiegel's Mouse, because in that, all the Nazis are cats and the dogs are the Americans.
There you go.
Interesting. Or not. Not really. Not at all.
It's almost certainly a reference to that, yeah.
Well, there you go. That's a slew of slightly above mediocre games for you. And
Vampire Survivors, which is
a game you could have played in 1982. More or less. Cool. Well, I guess that's it. Let's end the podcast. If you'd like to tweet us, you can do so at Crate and Crowbar. You can listen to these recordings as videos on YouTube, where you can find other nonsense by us. The address for that is youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. Thanks as always to our backers on Patreon. You can back us too at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar, or you can simply join our wonderful Discord community. They're a lovely bunch of people, the link for which is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. That's it. I've been Marsh Davis.
I've been Alex Wilshire.
And I've been Graham Smith.
Thanks
for listening, everybody.
Wow.